The evening sun was painting the sky orange and purple as 17-year-old Devin made his way down Maple Street. His basketball shoes squeaked slightly with each step, and his gym bag felt heavier than usual after 2 hours of practice. Coach had really pushed them today, running drills until everyone was dripping with sweat, but Devin didn't mind. Basketball was his escape, his passion, and possibly his ticket to college. He adjusted the strap on his shoulder and checked his phone. 6:45. His mom would be home soon, probably already wondering where he was. She always worried when he stayed late at practice, even though she knew Coach Thompson ran a tight ship. Devin smiled, thinking about how she'd probably saved him a plate of dinner, even though he'd told her he'd grab something on the way home. The neighborhood was quiet, the way it always was on weekday evenings. A few people were watering their lawns, and he could hear the distant sound of children playing in someone's backyard. This was the route he took every single day, past the Hendersons' house with the big oak tree, then the corner store where Mr. Patel always waved at him, and finally the last 2 blocks to his own street. Devin was thinking about tomorrow's chemistry test when he heard the low rumble of an engine slowing down behind him. He glanced back and saw a police cruiser creeping along at his pace. His stomach did a small flip, but he told himself to stay calm. He wasn't doing anything wrong, just walking home like he did every day. The cruiser pulled up beside him, and Devin kept walking, trying to act natural. His mom's voice echoed in his head, the same words she'd repeated to him since he was 12 years old. Stay calm, be polite. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden movements. He'd always thought she was being overly cautious, maybe even a little paranoid. Now, with his heart starting to beat faster, he understood why she worried. The passenger window rolled down and a voice called out, "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Devin stopped and turned to face the cruiser. 2 officers sat inside, both looking at him with expressions that weren't exactly friendly. The one in the passenger seat, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache, gestured for him to come closer. "Can I help you, officers?" Devin asked, trying to keep his voice steady. The officer in the driver's seat, younger with short-cropped hair, stepped out of the vehicle. His partner followed. Devin noticed how their hands rested near their belts and his mouth suddenly felt dry. "We've had some reports of suspicious activity in this area," the mustached officer said, looking Devin up and down. "What are you doing walking around here?" "I'm just heading home from basketball practice," Devin replied, gesturing to his gym bag. "I live just 2 blocks that way." 2 blocks, huh? The younger officer circled around, positioning himself slightly behind Devin. "What's your name?" "Devin Mitchell. I go to Lincoln High. I'm on the varsity basketball team. Got any ID on you?" the mustached officer asked. Devin's mind raced. He'd left his wallet in his locker at school because he didn't like carrying it during practice. It was something he did all the time, never thinking it would matter. "No, sir, I left it at school. But like I said, I live right down the street. My mom should be home by now if you want to." "So you're walking around with no ID?" the younger officer interrupted. His tone had an edge to it that made Devin's pulse quicken. "That's convenient. I didn't think I'd need it," Devin said, trying to stay polite. "I was just at practice. I take this route every single day." The mustached officer stepped closer. "Mind if we take a look in that bag?" Devin hesitated. He knew his rights, at least the basics his mom had taught him, but he also knew that arguing with police officers could make things worse. Much worse. "It's just my basketball stuff," he said. "Shoes, clothes, a water bottle." "So you won't mind showing us then?" the younger officer said. It wasn't a question. Devin slowly lowered his bag from his shoulder and unzipped it. His hands were shaking slightly, and he hated that the officers could probably see his nervousness. He pulled the bag open wider so they could see inside. "Empty it out," the mustached officer commanded. "Right here on the sidewalk." "Really?" "It's just, did I ask for your opinion?" "Empty the bag." Devin knelt down and began pulling items from his bag. His practice jersey still damp with sweat. His sneakers. A pair of shorts. His water bottle half full. A protein bar he'd forgotten to eat. His headphones. A balled-up pair of socks. Everything landed on the concrete in a messy pile. By now, a few neighbors had started to notice what was happening. Devin could see curtains moving in windows. Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down had stepped out onto her porch, her hand shading her eyes as she watched. Old Mr. Rodriguez was standing in his driveway, frozen in place with a garden hose in his hand. "What exactly are you looking for?" Devin asked, his voice coming out smaller than he intended, fitting a description. the younger officer said vaguely. There's been some break-ins around here lately. Devin felt a flash of frustration mixed with his fear. He'd lived in this neighborhood for 8 years. His mom had bought their house when he was 9 years old. He knew almost everyone on this street, and they knew him. The idea that he was somehow suspicious here in his own neighborhood felt absurd and infuriating. I've never been in any trouble, Devin said carefully. You can check. I'm a straight-A student. I volunteer at the community center on weekends. That's great, the mustached officer said in a tone that suggested he didn't believe a word. But we still need to verify who you are. Put your hands on the hood of the car. What? Why? I told you who I am. Hands on the car. Now. Devin's breath caught in his throat. This was really happening. He glanced toward his house just 2 blocks away. So close, but it might as well have been miles. He looked at Mrs. Chen on her porch and she gave him a small nod, her phone now in her hand. Can I please just call my mom? Devin asked, hearing the desperation creeping into his voice. She's probably home right now. She can come here and confirm everything I'm telling you. We'll decide when you can make calls, the younger officer said, moving toward Devin. Right now, you need to comply with our instructions. Devin felt the officer's hand on his shoulder, pushing him toward the patrol car. His basketball gear was still scattered across the sidewalk, and more neighbors were coming out now, watching the scene unfold. He could hear someone asking what was going on, another voice saying, That's just Devin, the kid from down the street. But the officers didn't seem to hear any of it. Or maybe they just didn't care. Devin pressed his palms against the warm metal of the police car's hood, his mind spinning. How had walking home from basketball practice turned into this? What description could he possibly fit? He knew the answer, even if the officers wouldn't say it out loud. He knew exactly what they saw when they looked at him. And in that moment, standing with his hands on the car while neighbors watched and whispered, Devin had never felt more helpless in his life. All he could do was stay calm, stay polite, and pray that this situation didn't get any worse before his mom found out what was happening. Devin's hands were flat against the hood of the patrol car, and he could feel the heat from the engine warming the metal beneath his palms. His heart was hammering so hard he wondered if the officers could hear it. Everything his mother had ever told him about situations like this was running through his mind like a broken record. Stay calm, don't argue. Be respectful. Comply with their instructions. But she'd also told him to know his rights, and right now those 2 pieces of advice felt like they were pulling him in opposite directions. Officer, please, Devin said, trying to keep his voice level. I really think there's been a misunderstanding. I live right down the street. Can you at least tell me what description I'm supposed to be fitting? The younger officer moved behind him, and Devin felt hands patting down his sides, checking his pockets. The touch was rough, impersonal, and it made Devin's skin crawl. He'd never been searched before, never been treated like a criminal. The humiliation of it right there on his own street with neighbors watching made his eyes sting. Black male, approximately 6 feet, dark clothing, carrying a bag, the mustached officer said flatly. That match you pretty well, don't you think? Devin almost laughed at the absurdity of it. That description could fit probably a dozen teenagers in this neighborhood alone. That's pretty vague, he said before he could stop himself. You got a problem with how we do our job? The younger officer's voice was sharp now, more aggressive than before. No, sir, Then keep your mouth shut unless we ask you something. The officer finished the pat-down and stepped back. Nothing on him. Devin slowly turned around, his back now against the car. More neighbors had gathered. He could see at least 6 or 7 people on their porches or standing in their yards. Mr. Rodriguez had put down his garden hose and was walking closer, concern written all over his weathered face. Officers, that boy lives with his mother 3 houses down from me, Mr. Rodriguez called out. He's a good kid. Plays basketball. I've known him for years. The mustached officer barely glanced in Mr. Rodriguez's direction. Sir, step back. This doesn't concern you. But I'm telling you, you've got the wrong person. He's not. Step back now or you'll be obstructing an investigation. Mr. Rodriguez stopped in his tracks, his hands raised slightly in surrender. But he didn't go back to his house. He stayed right there on the sidewalk, watching. Devin noticed Mrs. Chen was still on her porch and her phone was pointed in their direction. She was recording. The realization gave him a tiny spark of hope, but it also scared him. If she was recording, that meant she thought something might happen that needed to be documented. Look, Devin said, choosing his words carefully. I understand you're doing your job, but I'm telling you the truth. My name is Devin Mitchell. My mom is Angela Mitchell. We live at 217 Oak Avenue, just down that way. I go to Lincoln High School. I'm a junior, and I just came from basketball practice like I do every Tuesday and Thursday. Coach Thompson can verify that. So can any of these neighbors. The younger officer crossed his arms. And like we said, you have no ID to prove any of that. Because I left it in my locker at school, Devin said, frustration bleeding into his voice despite his best efforts to stay calm. I didn't think I'd need my ID to walk 2 blocks home. Well, maybe you should have thought about that, the mustached officer said. There was something in his tone, something almost smug, that made Devin's stomach turn. Can I please just call my mom? Devin asked again. Please, just let me make one phone call and this whole thing can be cleared up in 5 minutes. The younger officer exchanged a glance with his partner. For a second, Devin thought they might actually agree. Then the mustached officer shook his head. Not yet. We still need to verify your story. For all we know, you could be calling an accomplice. An accomplice? Devin couldn't keep the disbelief out of his voice. I'm trying to call my mother. So you say. The officer pulled out a notepad. Give me your address again. Devin repeated it along with his phone number and his mother's name. He gave them the name of his school, his coach, his guidance counselor, anything he could think of that might help prove he was telling the truth. The whole time the mustached officer wrote slowly, deliberately, like he had all the time in the world. You know what I think? The younger officer said, stepping closer to Devin. I think you're being awfully defensive for someone who claims he's got nothing to hide. I'm not being defensive, Devin protested. I'm just trying to understand why I'm being detained for walking home. Detained? The officer's eyebrows shot up. Who said you were being detained? We're just having a conversation. A conversation? Devin gestured to the patrol car behind him. You searched me. You've been questioning me for... He glanced at his phone, which was still in his hand. Almost 15 minutes now. You won't let me leave or call my mom. That sounds like being detained to me. The younger officer's jaw tightened. You know what? I don't like your attitude. Devin felt panic rising in his chest. He'd said too much, pushed too hard. His mom's warnings echoed louder now. Don't give them a reason. Don't escalate. But how was he supposed to just stand here and accept this? I'm sorry, Devin said quickly, trying to backtrack. I didn't mean to be disrespectful. I'm just confused about what's happening. What's happening, the mustached officer said, flipping his notepad closed. Is that you're in an area where there's been criminal activity. You match a description, you have no identification, and you're being uncooperative. I've answered every question you've asked me, Devin said, his voice cracking slightly. How is that uncooperative? Mrs. Chen's voice cut through the tension. Officers, I can confirm who he is. I'm recording this, by the way. That young man is Devin Mitchell. He lives down the street with his mother. I've watched him grow up. Whatever description you have, you've got the wrong person. The younger officer whipped around to face her. Ma'am, you need to stop recording and go back inside your house. This is my property, and I have every right to record what's happening on a public street, Mrs. Chen said firmly. Devin had never heard her sound so assertive before. She was usually quiet, always smiling and waving. Now she looked like a completely different person. That phone is interfering with our investigation, the mustached officer said, taking a step toward her porch. No, it's documenting your investigation, Mrs. Chen replied. There's a difference. The standoff between Mrs. Chen and the officers gave Devin a moment to think. His phone was still in his hand. The officers hadn't taken it, probably because they were too focused on searching his bag and questioning him. His mom's number was on speed dial. If he could just give me that phone, the younger officer said suddenly, reaching for Devin's hand. Devin pulled back instinctively. What, why? Hand it over, now. But it's my phone. You can't just... The officer grabbed Devin's wrist. The grip was tight, painful. Devin tried to pull away, and suddenly everything happened fast. The mustached officer moved in too, and before Devin fully understood what was happening, his arms were being yanked behind his back. The cold metal of handcuffs clicked around his wrists, each click feeling like a nail in a coffin. Hey, what are you doing? Mr. Rodriguez shouted. He didn't do anything. He's resisting, the younger officer said loudly, clearly for the benefit of anyone watching or recording. I'm not resisting. Devin's voice came out higher than he intended, fear overtaking everything else now. I just asked why you needed my phone. But the officers weren't listening. Devin felt hands pushing down on his shoulders, forcing him to sit on the curb. His phone had fallen to the ground during the scuffle, the screen facing up, his mom's contact photo visible. She was smiling in that picture, taken at his last birthday party. He'd never wanted to see her more in his entire life. You're making a big mistake, Devin said, and he hated how his voice shook. Your mom is going to what? The mustached officer asked, crouching down to Devin's level. Let me guess, she's a lawyer? A politician? Someone important? Devin met his eyes. She's an FBI agent. Both officers went still for a second. Then the younger one actually laughed. Right, and I'm the president. Kid, lying to police officers is just digging yourself deeper. I'm not lying, Devin said desperately. Her name is Angela Mitchell. She works at the federal building downtown. You can call and verify it. Sure we can, the mustached officer said, standing up. We'll get right on that. In the meantime, you're going to sit here quietly while we figure out what to do with you. Devin sat on the curb, hands cuffed behind his back, his basketball gear still scattered on the sidewalk, and watched as Mrs. Chen raised her phone higher, making sure she captured everything. He watched Mr. Rodriguez pull out his own phone, probably calling for help. He watched other neighbors gathering, whispering, recording, and he prayed that somehow, some way, his mother would find out what was happening before this situation got even worse. Mrs. Chen's hands were shaking as she kept her phone pointed at the scene below. She'd lived in this neighborhood for 23 years, raised 2 sons here, watched dozens of kids grow up on these streets. She knew Devin, she knew his mother, and she knew what she was witnessing wasn't right. The officers had turned back to their patrol car, talking in low voices while Devin sat on the curb, handcuffed and looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. The 17-year-old who always waved at her, who helped carry her groceries when he saw her struggling, who mowed lawns in the summer for extra money. That same kid was now sitting on concrete like a criminal. She couldn't just stand there and record. She had to do something. Mrs. Chen walked down her porch steps, keeping her phone up and recording, and called out, Devin, honey, what's your mother's phone number? Devin's head snapped up, hope flashing across his face. He rattled off the number quickly, repeating it twice to make sure she got it right. The younger officer turned sharply. Ma'am, you need to step back. I'm calling his mother, Mrs. Chen said firmly, already pulling up her phone's keypad with trembling fingers. Since you won't let him do it. That's interfering with... I'm a citizen making a phone call on my own property, Mrs. Chen interrupted, something she never would have imagined herself doing an hour ago. You can't stop me from doing that. She dialed the number before the officer could respond, her heart pounding as it rang once, twice, 3 times. Please pick up, she thought. Please, hello? The voice on the other end was professional, slightly distracted. Is this Angela Mitchell? Mrs. Chen asked, the words tumbling out fast. Yes, who is this? My name is Linda Chen. I live on your street, 3 houses down. I'm so sorry to call you like this, but your son is in trouble. The police have him in handcuffs right now and... What? The distraction was gone from Angela's voice, replaced by sharp, immediate focus. Where? What's happening? We're on Maple Street, right near the corner of Oak Avenue. 2 officers stopped him while he was walking home from practice. They searched him, they wouldn't let him call you, and now they have him sitting on the curb in handcuffs. I'm recording everything, but I'm on my way. Keep recording. Don't let them take him anywhere. I'll be there in 5 minutes. The line went dead. Mrs. Chen lowered her phone, her whole body flooded with relief. She looked at Devin and gave him a small nod. His eyes were closed, and she saw his chest rise and fall with what looked like the first real breath he'd taken in 20 minutes. His mother is coming, Mrs. Chen announced to the officers. The mustached officer barely looked at her. That's fine. We'll still need to verify his identity and file our report. You could have done that 15 minutes ago if you'd just let him call her, Mr. Rodriguez said from the sidewalk. More neighbors had gathered now, at least a dozen people. Some were recording on their phones. Others were just watching, arms crossed, faces troubled. Devin kept his eyes on the ground, trying to steady his breathing. His mom was coming. She'd fix this. She always knew what to do. But the thought of her seeing him like this, handcuffed on the street like some kind of criminal, made shame burn in his chest alongside the fear. The minutes crawled by. The officers went back to their cruiser, apparently writing up their report. Devin stayed on the curb, his hands starting to go numb from the cuffs. Nobody spoke much. The neighbors just waited, a silent vigil of witnesses. Then Devin heard it. The sound of an engine approaching fast, tires squealing slightly as a vehicle took the corner harder than it should have. A black SUV came into view and Devin's chest tightened with a mix of relief and anxiety. The SUV barely came to a complete stop before the driver's door flew open. Angela Mitchell stepped out and Devin had never been so happy and so mortified to see his mother at the same time. She was still in her work clothes, dark pants, a crisp button-down shirt, and over it her navy blue windbreaker with FBI printed in bold yellow letters across the back. Her badge was clipped to her belt, clearly visible. Her face was set in an expression Devin had only seen a handful of times, usually when she was on work calls that went bad. The officers looked up from their cruiser, and Devin watched their expressions change. The younger one's eyes went wide. The mustached officer straightened up, his hand moving away from where it had been resting casually on his belt. Angela walked straight toward them, her stride purposeful, controlled. "I'm Special Agent Angela Mitchell, FBI," she said, her voice carrying across the street. "That's my son. Why is he in handcuffs?" The mustached officer recovered first, clearing his throat. "Agent Mitchell, I asked you a question. Why is my 17-year-old son sitting on a curb in handcuffs? We received reports of suspicious activity in the area," the officer said. But his earlier confidence had evaporated. He matched a description and he had no identification on him. Angela's eyes narrowed. "What description?" "Black male, approximately 6 feet, dark clothing, carrying a bag. That's it?" Angela's voice was dangerous now, quiet but sharp as a blade. "That's your probable cause for detaining a minor?" "He was also uncooperative," the younger officer added, and Devin could hear the defensiveness in his voice. Angela turned to look at Devin for the first time since arriving. Their eyes met and Devin saw something flash across her face, pain, anger, fear, before she locked it down. She walked over to him, kneeling down to his level. "Are you hurt?" she asked softly, her professional mask slipping just enough for him to see the worried mother underneath. "No, ma'am," Devin said, his voice rough. "I'm okay." She examined him anyway, checking for any signs of injury, her hands gentle as they touched his arms, his shoulders. Then she stood and turned back to the officers, and the steel was back in her voice. "Uncuff him. Now." "We still need to complete our report," the mustached officer started. "I said, uncuff him now." Angela pulled out her phone. "Or I can call my supervisor at the field office and we can have a conversation about civil rights violations, unlawful detention of a minor, and denial of the right to contact a parent." "Your choice." The officers exchanged glances. The younger one looked like he wanted to argue, but the mustached officer pulled out his keys and walked over to Devin. The handcuffs came off, and Devin brought his hands forward, rubbing his wrists where the metal had dug into his skin. Angela helped him stand, her hand on his shoulder steadying him. "Mrs. Chen," she called out, "are you the one who called me?" "Yes," Mrs. Chen said, coming down from her porch, still holding her phone. "Did you record this?" "Every second from the time they put him in handcuffs. I need you to send that to me, please. And I'll need your contact information for my statement." Angela turned back to the officers. "I need both of your badge numbers now." The mustached officer, his name tag read Daniels, recited his badge number. The younger one, Martinez, did the same, though he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "What was the initial call that brought you here?" Angela asked. "Dispatch received a report of suspicious activity," Officer Daniels said. "From whom?" "It was an anonymous call?" "Anonymous," Angela repeated, her tone making it clear what she thought of that. "And based on an anonymous call reporting something as vague as suspicious activity, you felt justified in stopping my son, searching him, refusing to let him contact his parents and placing him in handcuffs?" He matched the description. "A description so broad it could apply to half the teenage boys in this city," Angela cut him off. "Did you run his name through any database? Did you call for backup to verify anything he told you? Did you make any attempt to confirm he actually lives on this street before you escalated to handcuffs?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Angela pulled out a small notebook from her pocket. the same kind Devon had seen her use when she was working cases at home. She started writing, noting the time, the officers' names and badge numbers, every detail she could observe. "Mom," Devon said quietly, "can we just go home?" She looked at him and her expression softened for just a moment. "In a minute, baby. I need to document this first." Officer Martinez shifted uncomfortably. "Agent Mitchell, we were just doing our job. We had a report, we investigated." "You harassed a child," Angela said, not looking up from her notes. "A child who told you repeatedly where he lived, who he was, and asked multiple times to call his mother. A child who was 2 blocks from his own house, in his own neighborhood, doing nothing illegal. You didn't investigate. You intimidated." Mr. Rodriguez spoke up from where he stood. "I told them who he was. They wouldn't listen." "I have that on video too," Mrs. Chen added. "They told me to go inside when I tried to help." Angela made notes of everything. When she finally looked up, her eyes were cold. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm taking my son home. Tomorrow morning, I'll be filing a formal complaint with your department's Internal Affairs Division. I'll be requesting all body camera footage from both of you, the dash cam footage from your vehicle, and the full incident report. I'll also be requesting the recording of the anonymous call that supposedly justified this stop." "That's your right," Officer Daniels said stiffly. "Yes, it is." Angela stepped closer to him. "And let me be very clear about something. I train law enforcement officers across this state on civil rights and de-escalation procedures. I know exactly what proper protocol looks like, and nothing about what happened here tonight was proper." She turned to Devon, putting her arm around his shoulders. "Come on, honey. Let's get your things and go home." Devon bent down to gather his scattered basketball gear, his hands still shaking slightly as he shoved everything back into his bag. The protein bar was crushed. His water bottle had rolled into the gutter. His practice jersey was dirty from the sidewalk. The walk to the house felt longer than 2 blocks. Angela kept her arm around Devon's shoulders, feeling how tense he was, how his breathing hadn't quite returned to normal. Her FBI training told her to stay calm, to process the situation logically, to follow proper channels. But the mother in her wanted to scream, wanted to turn around and give those officers a piece of her mind that would make their ears ring for a week. She did neither. She just held her son close and walked. When they got inside, Devon dropped his gym bag by the door and stood in the entryway like he didn't know what to do with himself. Angela locked the door behind them, then turned to face him. "Let me see your wrists," she said gently. Devon held out his arms. There were red marks where the handcuffs had been, not terrible but visible enough to make Angela's jaw clench. She touched them carefully, checking for any signs of serious injury. "Does anything else hurt?" she asked. "No, they grabbed my wrist pretty hard when they took my phone, and when they pushed me down to sit on the curb, it was kinda rough, but I'm okay." "Really?" Angela guided him to the kitchen table and made him sit down. She filled a glass with water and handed it to him, watching as he drank it in 3 long gulps. His hands were still shaking slightly. "I'm going to ask you some questions," Angela said, sitting across from him. "Not as a mom right now, but as someone who needs to know exactly what happened. Can you do that?" Devon nodded. "Start from the beginning. What time did you leave practice?" For the next 20 minutes, Devon walked her through everything. The walk home, the police cruiser slowing down, every question they asked, every order they gave, how they'd searched his bag, how they'd refused to let him call her, how things had escalated when he'd questioned why they needed his phone. Angela took notes, her face carefully neutral, but inside she was a storm of emotions. Anger at the officers, fury at a system that allowed this to keep happening, guilt that despite all her warnings and preparations, she hadn't been able to protect her son from this. And underneath it all, a cold fear about what could have happened if Mrs. Chen hadn't called her. "You did everything right," Angela said when he finished. "You stayed calm, you were respectful, you tried to de-escalate. I'm so proud of how you handled yourself. Then why did it feel like I was doing everything wrong?" Devon's voice cracked. "I kept thinking about everything you taught me and I tried to do it all, but nothing worked. They just kept—" He stopped, his jaw working as he tried to keep his composure. Angela reached across the table and took his hand. "Baby, listen to me. This wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Not one single thing. I should have just kept my mouth shut. When I asked about the description, when I questioned why they needed my phone, maybe if I'd just—" "No." Angela's voice was firm. Don't do that. Don't blame yourself for exercising your rights. Those officers made choices tonight, and every single one of those choices was wrong. That's on them, not you. Devin pulled his hand back and rubbed his face. I told them you were FBI. They laughed at me. They thought I was lying. I know. It was so... He struggled to find the word. Humiliating. Sitting there on the curb with everyone watching like I'd actually done something wrong. Mrs. Chen saw. Mr. Rodriguez saw. All the neighbors. What are they going to think? They're going to think exactly what they saw. That you were treated unfairly by officers who let their biases override their training. Angela stood up and started pacing. And those officers are going to face consequences for what they did. What kind of consequences? Angela pulled out her phone and started scrolling through her contacts. First thing tomorrow, I'm filing a formal complaint with Internal Affairs. I'm also going to request a meeting with the Chief of Police. I'll get the body cam footage, the dash cam footage, everything. Mrs. Chen's video is going to be crucial too. Will they actually do anything? Devin asked, and there was something in his voice that made Angela's heart hurt. A cynicism that shouldn't belong to a 17-year-old. Yes, Angela said firmly. They will. Because I'm not going to let this go. She made several calls while Devin sat at the table, his head in his hands. The first was to her supervisor at the FBI field office, reporting the incident and requesting official documentation. The second was to a colleague who specialized in civil rights cases. The third was to a lawyer friend who'd handled police misconduct cases before. With each call, Angela's professional mask grew stronger, her voice more controlled. But Devin could see the way her free hand clenched into a fist, the way her jaw tightened when she recounted what had happened to him. When she finally put the phone down, it was almost 9 o'clock. Devin realized he'd completely forgotten about dinner, about his chemistry test tomorrow, about everything except the weight of what had happened. I need to send some emails tonight, Angela said. But first, have you eaten? Devin shook his head. Come on. I'll heat up the leftovers. They ate in relative silence, both of them picking at their food more than actually eating it. Devin kept replaying the evening in his mind, wondering if there was something he could have said differently, some magic combination of words that would have made the officers listen to him. Stop it, Angela said suddenly. Devin looked up. Stop what? I can see you running through it in your head, second-guessing yourself. Stop. You can't fix other people's prejudices by being more perfect. Trust me, I've tried. Has this ever happened to you? Devin asked. Angela was quiet for a moment. Yes, more than once. When I was younger, before I had my badge to flash, and even after there have been situations. She trailed off, then seemed to make a decision. When I was 23, fresh out of the academy, I got pulled over while driving home from the gym. The officer didn't believe I was FBI. He made me get out of the car, searched it, the whole thing. Even when I showed him my badge and credentials, he was convinced they were fake. It took a call to my field office and 45 minutes on the side of the road before he finally let me go. What happened to him? Nothing. I filed a complaint, but it went nowhere. That was 17 years ago, though. Things are different now. There's more accountability, more oversight. Body cameras, citizen recording, social media. It's harder for bad cops to hide behind the badge. But they still do it, Devin said. Yes, they still do it. That's why we can't let it slide when it happens. Angela reached across the table and squeezed his hand. I know you're tired. I know you probably just want to forget about this and move on. But we have to fight this, Devin. Not just for you, but for every other kid who might end up in the same situation. Devin nodded slowly. Okay, what do we need to do? Over the next hour, Angela walked him through what would happen next. The complaint process, the investigation, the possibility of media attention. She made it clear that it wouldn't be easy, that there would be questions and interviews and possibly people who would try to discredit his story. Some people will say you must have done something to provoke them, Angela warned. They'll look for any excuse to justify what those officers did. You need to be prepared for that. That's not fair. No, it's not, but it's reality. Angela pulled up a document on her laptop. I'm writing up a detailed account of everything that happened tonight while it's still fresh. I need you to do the same. Write down every detail you can remember, no matter how small. Times, exact words if you can recall them. Descriptions of the officer's actions, everything. Devin got his laptop and started typing. It was harder than he expected, putting it all into words. Every sentence brought back the helplessness he'd felt, the fear, the confusion. But he kept going because his mom needed him to, because some other kid needed him to. Around 11, Angela's phone rang. It was Mrs. Chen, calling to make sure Devin was okay and to let Angela know she'd already sent the video to 3 different cloud storage accounts, just in case. "That woman is a saint," Angela said after hanging up. "Remind me to bake her something." By midnight, Angela had drafted a comprehensive complaint, sent copies to her supervisor and the lawyer, and created a timeline of events cross-referenced with Devin's account. She sat back in her chair, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "We should both get some sleep," she said. "You still have school tomorrow." "Mom, I don't think I can go to school tomorrow." Angela looked at him, really looked at him, and saw how drained he was. "Okay, you can stay home. We'll call it a personal day." They said goodnight at the top of the stairs. Devin headed to his room, but he paused at the door. "Mom?" "Yeah? Thanks for coming so fast. And for everything." Angela felt tears prick her eyes for the first time that night. "Always, baby. Always." After Devin went to bed, Angela sat alone in her home office, staring at the complaint on her screen. Tomorrow this would become official. Tomorrow, she'd walk into the police station and set off a chain of events that couldn't be undone. She thought about the officers, Daniels and Martinez. Wondered if they were home with their families right now thinking about what they'd done. Wondered if they felt any regret, any understanding of how their actions had affected a teenage boy who'd just been trying to walk home. Probably not, she thought grimly. But they would. She'd make sure of it. Angela hit send on the email to Internal Affairs, CCing the chief of police, her supervisor, and the lawyer. The complaint was filed. There was no going back now. She finally allowed herself to cry, quiet tears of anger and relief and lingering fear. Her son was safe. He was home. But he'd been changed by what happened tonight, marked by an experience he should never have had to face. Tomorrow she'd put on her professional armor again and fight this battle properly. But tonight, she was just a mother whose child had been hurt, and she let herself feel all of it. The call came at 8:30 the next morning. Angela was already dressed in her full FBI field attire, ready to head downtown, when her phone lit up with a number she recognized, Police Chief Raymond Williams. "Agent Mitchell." His voice was formal but noticeably strained. "I received your complaint last night. I'd like to speak with you this morning if possible." "I was already planning to come to the station," Angela replied coolly. "Actually, I was hoping I could come to you. Would you be available for a home visit? I think this conversation would be better conducted privately." Angela paused. A home visit from the chief of police wasn't standard procedure. It meant he was taking this seriously, or at least taking the optics seriously. "I'll be here. Thank you. I'll be there within the hour." Devin was still asleep when the doorbell rang exactly 53 minutes later. Angela opened it to find Chief Williams on her porch, in uniform but alone. No entourage of officers or lawyers trailing behind him. That was interesting. "Chief Williams," Angela said, stepping aside to let him in. "Agent Mitchell, thank you for seeing me." He was in his late 50s, gray hair cropped short, with the kind of weathered face that came from decades in law enforcement. He carried a tablet and a manila folder. They sat in the living room, and Williams didn't waste time with small talk. "I spent half the night reviewing the body camera footage from Officers Daniels and Martinez. I also watched the video your neighbor submitted. Agent Mitchell, I want to start by saying I'm deeply sorry for what happened to your son. With all due respect, Chief, I'm not interested in apologies right now. I'm interested in action." Williams nodded like he'd expected that response. "Understood. Let me tell you what I've done so far and what I'm prepared to do moving forward." He opened the tablet and turned it so Angela could see. "This is the body cam footage from Officer Daniels. I want you to watch it and then we'll talk." Angela watched the footage in silence. Seeing it from the officer's perspective was somehow worse than hearing about it secondhand. She could hear every word of Devin's polite responses, could see how he kept his hands visible, how he complied with every request, and she could hear the escalation in the officers' voices, the subtle mockery, the way they dismissed everything her son said. When Officer Martinez laughed after Devin mentioned she was FBI, Angela's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. The footage ended with Angela's arrival. Williams closed the tablet. That was difficult to watch, he said quietly. I've been in law enforcement for 34 years. I've made mistakes, I've seen mistakes, but this… He shook his head. This was a fundamental failure at multiple levels. What are you going to do about it? Angela asked. Williams opened the manila folder. As of 6 this morning, both officers Daniels and Martinez have been placed on administrative leave pending a full internal investigation. They've been stripped of their badges and service weapons. They will not be on the streets while this investigation is ongoing. How long will the investigation take? Standard protocol is 30 to 60 days, but I'm pushing for completion within 3 weeks. I've assigned our best investigator, Captain Lisa Torres, to handle it personally. She's tough, fair, and she doesn't tolerate misconduct. Angela leaned forward. Chief, I've seen investigations like this before. Officers get a slap on the wrist, maybe a suspension, and then they're back on duty. I need more than that. So do I, Williams said firmly. Agent Mitchell, I'm not going to sit here and pretend our department is perfect. We've had issues, we've had complaints, but I've been trying to change the culture since I took this position 3 years ago, and incidents like this undermine everything we're working toward. He pulled out more documents. Beyond the investigation into Daniels and Martinez specifically, I'm implementing immediate changes. Mandatory retraining for all patrol officers on implicit bias, de-escalation, and proper procedures for interactions with minors. Every single officer, no exceptions. That's a start, Angela acknowledged. I'm also proposing a civilian review board to oversee complaints against officers. It's something the city council has been discussing for years, but it keeps getting pushed back. I'm going to use this incident to push it through. Why? Angela asked bluntly. Why are you doing all this? You could sweep this under the rug, protect your officers, make my life difficult for filing the complaint. That's usually how this goes. Williams met her eyes. Because I have a grandson who's 15 years old. He's biracial. And when I watched that footage last night, I saw him. I saw my grandson in your son's place, and it scared me. It scared me that officers under my command could treat a kid like that. His voice roughened slightly. I became a cop to protect people, Agent Mitchell. All people. And if my officers can't do that, they don't deserve to wear the badge. Angela studied him for a long moment. She'd developed pretty good instincts about when people were lying over her years with the FBI. Williams seemed genuine. Tired, frustrated, but genuine. I want regular updates on the investigation, Angela said. Weekly at minimum. You'll have them. And I want to see the results of that retraining. I want metrics, data, proof that things are actually changing. I'll personally ensure you get all of that. Williams paused. There's something else. The local news got wind of the story. A reporter called this morning asking for a statement. So far, I've declined to comment pending the investigation. But the story's going to break soon. I wanted you to hear it from me first. Angela had expected this. Stories like this tended to spread fast, especially in the age of social media and camera phones. How do you plan to handle the media? Honestly, I'm not going to defend the indefensible. I'll acknowledge what happened, explain what we're doing about it, and commit to doing better. If you're willing, I'd like you to be part of a press conference. Not to speak necessarily unless you want to, but to show that we're working together on this. I'll think about it, Angela said. The conversation lasted another 30 minutes. Williams walked her through every step of the investigation process, the timeline for hearings, the possible outcomes for Daniels and Martinez. By the time he left, Angela felt cautiously optimistic that real change might actually happen. Devin came downstairs an hour later, finding his mother at the kitchen table surrounded by documents. Chief of Police was just here, Angela said without looking up. Here. At our house? Angela filled him in on everything Williams had said. Devin listened quietly, his expression hard to read. So what happens now? He asked when she finished. Now we wait for the investigation to conclude. But in the meantime, you and I have somewhere to be this afternoon. Where? Lincoln High School. I talked to Principal Hayes this morning. She's organizing a forum on police interactions and student rights. She wants you to speak if you're comfortable with it. Devin's eyes widened. Speak in front of everyone? You don't have to, Angela said quickly. But she thought it might help other students to hear from someone who went through it. To know their rights, to know how to handle themselves in similar situations. Devin was quiet for a long time. Will you be there? Every step of the way. Okay, he said finally. I'll do it. The forum that afternoon was packed. The school auditorium was filled with students, parents, teachers, and several community leaders. Devin sat on the stage next to his mother, his hands clasped tightly in his lap as Principal Hayes introduced the purpose of the gathering. When it was his turn to speak, Devin walked to the microphone on shaky legs. He looked out at the sea of faces, his classmates, his teachers, people from the neighborhood. Mrs. Chen was in the third row, smiling encouragingly. Mr. Rodriguez sat near the back, giving him a thumbs up. "My name is Devin Mitchell," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "And 2 nights ago I was walking home from basketball practice when I was stopped by police." He told his story. Not all of it. Some parts were still too raw, too personal. But he told them enough. About the fear, the helplessness, the humiliation, about how he'd done everything right and it still hadn't been enough. "I'm one of the lucky ones," Devin said, his voice growing stronger. "My mom is FBI. She had the training, the resources, the authority to fight back. But what about kids who don't have that? What about the kids whose parents don't know how to navigate the system, who don't have videos to prove what happened, who are too scared to speak up?" The auditorium was completely silent. "That's why I'm standing here today," Devin continued. "Because this doesn't just affect me. It affects all of us. And if we don't talk about it, if we don't demand better, nothing will change." The applause started slowly, then built until the entire auditorium was on their feet. Devin looked at his mother, and she was crying, not even trying to hide it, just smiling at him with so much pride it made his chest tight. Over the next 2 weeks, the story spread beyond their small community. Local news picked it up, then regional outlets. The video Mrs. Chen recorded was viewed thousands of times. Devin gave 2 more interviews, each time finding it a little easier to talk about what happened. 23 days after the incident, Chief Williams called Angela with the results of the investigation. Officers Daniels and Martinez had been found guilty of multiple policy violations, including excessive force, unlawful detention, and failure to follow proper procedure with a minor. Daniels received a 30-day suspension without pay and was required to complete extensive retraining before returning to duty. Martinez, who had a prior complaint of excessive force on his record, was demoted and transferred to a desk position. It wasn't perfect justice. Angela had hoped for harsher consequences, but it was something. It was acknowledgement. It was accountability. The real change came gradually. The mandatory retraining happened. The Civilian Review Board was approved by the City Council. And slowly, conversation by conversation, policy by policy, things began to shift. Devin went back to his normal routine: school, basketball practice, homework. But he wasn't quite the same person who'd walked home that evening 3 weeks ago. He carried himself differently now, spoke up more in class, paid attention to news about police reform. One evening, as they sat at dinner, Devin looked up from his phone. Coach Thompson asked if I'd help organize a community basketball game. Cops versus high school students. He thinks it might help build relationships. Angela raised her eyebrows. "What do you think?" Devin considered it. "I think it's worth a try. Things won't change overnight, but maybe." He shrugged. "Maybe it's a start." "Maybe it is," Angela agreed. That night, lying in bed, Angela thought about everything that had happened. The fear, the anger, the fight, the small victories. She thought about her son who'd faced something terrible and come out stronger. She thought about Mrs. Chen and Mr. Rodriguez and all the neighbors who'd stood up when it mattered. Change was slow. Change was frustrating. But change was possible, and that, Angela decided, was enough to keep fighting for.